With the OPPO R7 and the R7 Plus being released this year and really impressing us, does the OPPO R7s hold up to our expectations? Well, let's find out. I'm Crystal Laura, and this is our review of the OPPO R7s. To put it simply, the OPPO R7s is a mix between the OPPO R7 and the OPPO R7 Plus in terms of design. It's right in the middle when it comes to size with its 5.5-inch screen, and the capacitive buttons that were found on the R7 have been removed just like the R7 Plus, which makes sense as it helps keep the R7s from being a gigantic phone. Other than that, you could say the OPPO R7s looks exactly like its last generation, except when you take a look at this gorgeous new color it comes in, rose gold. Yes, the OPPO lineup has always had more mid-range smartphones, but when it comes to mid-range phones, the OPPO R7s is one of the most beautifully designed ones we've seen. The R7s features a metal unibody design that looks incredible, especially with this rose gold color. It feels very smooth and is great to hold, especially after not using it for a while with that aluminum body feeling cold in your hands. For an Android phone with a 5.5-inch screen, we have pretty familiar dimensions that also keep this phone from feeling awkward in your hand. It's ever so slightly thicker than last generation's R7, only by 0.7 millimeters. But that extra thickness goes a long way, hitting a much bigger 3070 mAh battery inside. And still, 7mm in thickness is super thin, and when you're holding and looking at this phone all day, it feels and looks expensive. It's incredibly well built and feels very solid. OPPO seems to really care about the design of their smartphones, and even paid attention to the smallest of details with the power and volume buttons. They are an opposite size, which keeps them from being too high or too low from where your fingers are located. You can find the headphone jack on top, which sits a little more comfortably with this extra thickness, and your micro USB port and speaker are located on the bottom. The OPPO R7s definitely competes for most beautifully designed phone compared to other flagships out there, and I even had somebody come up to me while testing the device and ask about it. You're going to have a great viewing experience here on the OPPO R7s with this 5.5-inch Full HD AMOLED panel. If the OPPO R7 Plus was a bit too big for you at its 6 inches, the R7s may be what you were waiting for. It's a great size for watching videos and playing games, making for a more immersive experience while still being able to slip into a pocket and forget about it. It is an AMOLED panel, which we already think puts it over the top of most IPS LCD panels. The blacks are going to be much darker than you would find on an LCD, making certain things appear to pop out of the screen, but comparing to other AMOLED panels, it's not the best. This is still a fantastic screen with nice colors, even if they're a bit toned down in saturation compared to other AMOLED displays. OPPO said they tried making the cooler colors warmer to deliver a more visually pleasing experience to the user, and it really does look great. AMOLED panels aren't known for being the brightest, but this OPPO R7s does outperform most, making it easier to see in outdoors. With all phones with white fronts, you will see a black border surrounding the screen, but you'll quickly get used to ignoring it as it is much smaller than last versions. And of course, we still have Gorilla Glass covering the display, but you'll find the newest and tougher 4th generation here. I really can't find anything wrong with the display, even with the large screen at 1080 by 1920, making a pixel density of 401. You shouldn't have any complaints with this AMOLED panel here. And with OPPO's Color OS skin full of dark skies and lots of colors, it makes for a very pleasant viewing experience. Internally, not much has changed besides an extra gig of RAM, which is quite surprising. You still have a Snapdragon 615 with an Adreno 405, but yes, we now have 4 gigs of RAM, which is interesting to see matched with the mid-range processor. The OPPO R7s comes with 32 gigs of internal storage, but users do have access to a microSD card tray up to 128 gigs, although that tray also doubles as a SIM card tray as well, so you can choose to have 2 SIM cards or 1 nano SIM with an SD card. I tested the OPPO R7s on AT&T here in New Jersey and had great reception like usual with access to 4G networks the majority of the time. Now with that Snapdragon 615, the R7s ran like we expected and then some. Geekbench shows the R7s with a 707 single-core score for a combined 3,196 multi-core score. That's a decent amount higher than its predecessor, the R7, and even Antutu gave it a superior rating by about 6,000 points. In real-world usage, the OPPO R7s does a fair job, with OPPO continuously improving software performance. The R7s handles everyday tasks with a breeze. Apps open fast, and jumping into Chrome, searching for a site, and scrolling through it is quite smooth the majority of the time. But sometimes you will see stutters in the animations, like when opening up the recent app screen or scrolling through certain parts of the phone, but that's really as far as performance issues go. Even gaming runs very smoothly with barely any frame drops, creating a more than playable experience. Overall, the phone runs really well and is also very reliable when it comes to the battery. With just an extra 0.7mm in thickness, OPPO managed to fit a much larger 3070 mAh battery into the R7s, which is much needed with the R7 only sporting a 2320 mAh battery. Now instead of having a battery that barely reached the end of the day, we have a battery that should no doubt last you the entire day, even with some heavy usage. On what I consider to be a medium use day, I could stretch the R7s to about 5 hours of screen on time without touching any of the battery saving modes. My location set to high accuracy, email set to push, and with brightness set to about 70%. That's really good for me. Now if you're gonna have a more heavy usage day, like taking a lot of pictures and videos, and even gaming for a while, I could still get about 4 hours of screen on time, which is very impressive. Now if you do kill the battery on the R7s, you'll have some comfort in knowing the OPPO R7s is capable of fast charging, which can charge this battery from dead to 90% in only 50 minutes, or 2 hours of talk time in just 5 minutes of charging. We were wondering if OPPO would include the fingerprint scanner found on the Plus model, but unfortunately you won't find it here. Also, NFC still isn't a part of the OPPO R7s, but there are some extra features to talk about here, the first being the little notification light that quickly flashes on the top right. And also the speaker that's located on the bottom left actually creates some nice sound. It's not too muffled, and although it's nowhere near the loudest speaker I've heard on a smartphone, it gets plenty loud enough for watching videos, although try to stay away from the top two settings as a lot of compression will start to kick in. The OPPO R7s is running a totally redone skin of Android called ColorOS 2.1. It's based on Android 5.1, which runs out of the box, and really, like many Chinese OEMs take on Android, it's vastly different from stock. I really do love a stock Android experience, as you probably know by now, but still, ColorOS may be my favorite totally rethought out skin of Android. Everything functions very much the same as you would be familiar with, just with a different look. From the recent app screens to even the volume interface, they're entirely redesigned. But OPPO really paid attention to detail here, with each redesign either having a purpose or just looking really cool. For example, in the settings menu, when sliding from tab to tab, text will slide off the screen depending on where your finger is on the screen. And when swiping the lock screen to get into the home screen, these animations all have a unified feel and look, making the entire ColorOS feel very well thought out. Although yes, it's very obviously inspired by much larger companies, with the X dismissing of the lock screen notifications, the wiggling of icons being rearranged on the home screen, the entire interface design of the camera, and of course the emojis. But they're really fun, and like I said, the whole software experience evokes this certain unified enjoyable feeling. There are some questionable decisions however, like the removal of an app drawer, the back button on the right which cannot be changed to the more traditional left placement, and what you would think would be the recent apps button is actually more of a universal settings interface that changes depending on the app you're in, and most of the time it won't even do anything like an Instagram. But it does act as a recent app screen, however you will have to hold it and wait for a good 2 seconds before it opens up, which can kind of slow down your workflow. In any event, ColorOS has tons of extra features that really we don't have enough time to address every one, so I'll name a few and you can head on over to our website for a more in-depth look. We have an eye protection display setting that tints the screen to have a harsh pink hue depending on the level you set it at, which apparently helps on your eyesight. Blue light in the visible spectrum can be harmful to your eyes, and a lot of users like to install apps to make it a little more easy to look at, but on here it's built right into the system. There's a one-handed mode that's always easily accessible by swiping from a bottom corner to the middle. There's all sorts of gestures and motions within settings, like the drawing of symbols to launch apps, which you can actually choose yourself, adjusting volume with 2 fingers, double tapping the home button to lock the screen, and even a changing lock screen that updates and displays news and other images. ColorOS is not only beautiful and unique, but comes jam-packed with a lot of fun and useful features. The OPPO R7s's 13 megapixel camera is more of the same found on its predecessor. With its flash shot technology, it can focus in as little as 0.1 seconds with optimal lighting and launches very fast. That's pretty much the only thing that's changed here. OPPO claims the camera app launches 30% faster than before, and actually it is quite fast. You won't find any optical image stabilization, however, but still you manage to get some really great photos in outdoor areas. Sure, that can be said for most cameras these days, but colors actually look really great without being too saturated. The camera actually picks up quite a lot of detail too, and it exposes quite nicely the majority of the time, but for the few times it doesn't, HDR is there and can help bring down the brighter areas or bring out the shadows, even with it looking a little unrealistic. There will be points in time that a little more contrast wouldn't hurt, but with such little noise in these images, you're going to have a great time looking back to photos that you've taken. When you move into lower lighting, the shutter speed does take quite a dive, sometimes taking a full second to snap a photo. This creates less sharp images, producing some slightly blurred images. That being said though, low light photos definitely aren't bad. There's no purple color shift in the shadows, and there is some processing going on to remove the majority of the noise, creating a more soft image. The front-facing 8-megapixel camera looks very good with a great amount of detail too. For a selfie cam on a mid-range smartphone, I'm pretty impressed with the quality here. In low light, you do get lots of noise and the colors are much less vibrant, but still the image is nice and bright enough. Of course, OPPO doesn't oversight its camera features either, with tons of options like beauty modes, filters, slow shutters, GIF modes, and even an audio photo mode which adds little audio clips to your pictures, which I actually really like the concept of, even if it's a little silly. Video looks decent when shooting in Full HD, just make sure you go into settings and set it to 1080p as 720p is its default. You get very realistic and cool colors, unlike a lot of mid-range smartphones that have that nasty orange hue over everything. Without optical image stabilization, video can be quite shaky when not held carefully. Overall, it's not the sharpest 1080p video that you'll find in a phone, but it's definitely not bad, and its focus is quite fast and never really hunts for focus, which is nice. Slow-mo is also a feature, as well as time-lapse. And even with not much being upgraded here with the R7s's camera sensor, you still should have a very pleasant camera experience packed with fun features that in the end creates photos worth posting and sharing. I wasn't expecting to love the OPPO R7s as much as I did. I wouldn't have thought such an unfamiliar and heavily skinned version of Android with mid-range hardware would make for a very enjoyable experience for me. The attention to detail OPPO took on the outside of the R7s and even on the inside when it comes to software really is incredible. Of course, the heavy reskin won't be enjoyed by all, and the lack of NFC, a fingerprint scanner, and high-end specs will turn some users away, but for a $399 premium feeling device, you really do get a lot. If you're in the market for a premium feeling phone that doesn't break the bank, the OPPO R7s is definitely one of the best. Well, we reached the end of the review. Thanks for watching. Comment below and let me know what you think of the OPPO R7s. Also check out these other cool videos on the side here and click on the Google Play link up there for our Android Authority app. And last but certainly not least, head on over to AndroidAuthority.com for the full in-depth review because we are your source for all things Android.